Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic today. Let's discuss. What's a place that seems fine during the day but is super creepy at night? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
Used to do security work for a company that has stores and malls. Being in a mall late at night by yourself is super creepy. The only noise you hear down the way is the kiddie area rides laughing. I used to work for a state medical examiner's office. I worked second shift with some occasional overnights, and we relatively often had to take trips to either or satellite offices, which were 1 to 1.5 hours away from the HQ office in the state capital, one of which was particularly desolate, set back in the woods and pretty remote. Let me tell you, no matter how often you go there, or how comfortable you are doing that type of job, being in a morgue alone at 03:17 in the morning during a ridiculous thunderstorm is spooky. The wind is knocking tree branches against the autopsy room windows. The primary lights are turned off, so the office is dimly lit except for the red glow of the exit signs. You pull up to the garage doors, and there's one measly light barely illuminating the end of the driveway. No other lights around. Surrounded by woods, lightning occasionally lighting up the area just enough to get a glimpse of your surroundings before it goes dark again. You can't tell whether or not the wind is blowing the trees or there's a coyote or something out there. All while you're trying to keep your shit in your ass while struggling to get a 320-pound cadaver out of the back of your truck without the stretcher falling over. Not to mention it's summer, so the fog gets pretty thick with the cold rain on the warm ground. TL. DR, working in a morgue alone during a massive thunderstorm. Our barn. I can go in there during the day without lights and it's fine. It's pitch black, but at night? Nope. I live right next to a disused airfield. It's a square kilometer of completely clear flat land and is really unnerving. There's also the control tower in the center that gets extremely spooky at night. The only way in is to scale the wall and then lower yourself in from the roof through an upstairs window. I should also say that I live in the north of Scotland, where flat land is pretty uncommon. Edit. A lot of people have asked for pictures, and I'll try my best to get some. However, there's a very aggressive flock of birds nesting on the control tower, so I don't know how close I can get. Dirt roads. I grew up on one, and would walk it to get to the main road to catch the bus for school. I'd have to walk it at night to babysit my neighbor's kids, and the difference was crazy. During the day, it's bright, there are flowers, and the worst you'll see is a snake or a deer. At night, the roar of the frogs is deafening. The trees seem to encroach on the road, and you catch glowing eyes in the woods around you. Service stations, rest stops, fine in the day, but I've been in a few 24-hour ones way out in the middle of nowhere at night where I'm literally the only car in the lot, and all the lowlights are on, and the staff is a skeleton crew mostly in the back doing stock. I remember standing in one huge rest stop once, and it was just me and this creepy arcade music playing. It felt like I was the only person left alive after some apocalypse. I work midnights at my local hospital and end up in the OR rooms a lot. I help prep for the next day's surgeries. Totally creepy. A recently divorced uncle's house with unkempt lawn and a 1992 Saturn sedan that's missing half the rear bumper parked in the front. A toy store, rows upon rows of stuffed animals, dolls, and action figures all staring at you in the dark with their dead eyes, right up until the doll you're looking at turns her head and winks at you. Anywhere in Milwaukee. I work late nights and the city is 1000% creepy at night. 500,000 people spread over almost 100 miles, and you're lucky to see a single sober person. If you're unlucky, you run into a Milwaukee crackhead, and boy, there's something else. Malls. I worked at a shop in a pretty busy mall in California and was there overnight doing stock or inventory. I had to leave the shop to throw some trash away, and walking the mall in almost complete silence was terrifying. Any place with tremendous amounts of energy during the day and nearly none at night are creepy. I've had to stay behind at my school a few times, usually being one of maybe a dozen or so others by the time I leave. My foster carers always pick me up in a weird area that leaves me walking through different hallways than everyone else, and it never fails to scare me. Walking through hallways that are only illuminated by fire exit signs and should have crowds of year 7s screaming but are dead silent. The woods, playgrounds. There's a playground near me that's actually built on the foundations of a tuberculosis sanatorium. My son loves it during the day, but at dusk, we skedaddle. A graveyard. I had a lot of friends growing up that would love to walk through graveyards late at night. I never joined them because I have seen enough horror movies to know what happens to the carefree teens walking through cemeteries late at night. This will probably get buried, but rest stops. One of the eeriest places I've ever been is a small rest stop way out in the middle of nowhere in far southeastern Oregon. It was about midnight, and in the middle of nowhere, just flat desert, just sand and some low brush. If you've ever been out by Plush, Oregon, you know what I mean. We were driving down the highway, the only main road for miles, and everything was pitch black. You couldn't see anything out the windows, just pitch black. All we could see was the patch of road in front of us, illuminated by the headlights and the occasional suicidal jackrabbit. Finally, we came to a small crossroads with a little building and a parking lot next to it. Nothing else, just one building. We parked and got out, and everything was dead silent. No birds, no animals, no wind, nothing. The surroundings were, again, pitch black, and yet, at the same time, the sky was clear enough to see thousands of stars. Everything felt so dead and abandoned. Just you and a broken down rest stop alone in the middle of a pitch black, dead silent desert. It was pretty creepy, but kind of beautiful at the same time.
And rest stops make a lot of sense as something that's creepy at night, sometimes creepy during the day too, at least the men's room. But all that being said, there's this like warm feeling of almost a strange comfort in this like post-apocalyptic fantasy, this momentary thing that hits my brain. I don't know, maybe I'm just weird, but you guys are the best. Have a great day.
A shopping mall. I used to work third shift security at a pretty understaffed one, so I was regularly the only person in the building from around 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. after the janitors left. Besides the occasional teenager wearing a clown mask and staring at me through a window, I thought I saw mannequins moving, heard small children laughing, heard banging coming from the ceiling, etc. Antique shops and second-hand stores. I was the only kid who would work for extra money at my aunt's antique shop after hours, dusting and straightening up and refurbishing the items that came in. It didn't help, it was an old building from the 1800s too. Thumps, whispering, and shadows were normal. Whenever she got in new stock, new things started to happen. I was weird and loved it. All my cousins were chickens. Churches. I used to work at this really old church in my city, and I hated locking up after weddings because I just got this really uneasy feeling when I was in there by myself at night. Portland. Seriously, I'd walk around as a kid downtown when I was 12 or 13 and take the MAX train down there, essentially an electric-powered train on cables, and everything was cool in the daylight hours. It's like a switch gets flipped in that city, even in what seems like regular neighborhoods during the day. All of a sudden, all the folks selling delicious food truck wares suddenly act aggressive, and people you saw singing or joking with passing folk on the street are now shifty and inspire a panic unlike many others I've experienced in my life. And if you ride the bus, there are a night and day difference in the populace taking the bus in the middle of the day and those taking it after 5 p.m. It's crazy because I used public transit a majority of my life and was so comfortable with people that I could sleep on a bus during the daylight hours and even nighttime hours in other cities. But in Portland, the Keep Portland Weird mantra feels more like don't get shanked and keep your hands on your valuables. Might be low-hanging fruit here, but theaters. Acting theaters, not movie theaters. For a while I was helping closing up our big local old theater. There's just no way to not assume that place is absolutely haunted. Cement basement hallways. Even if it wasn't dark outside yet, I just knew there were ghosts all around me. Pretty sure no one was ever murdered there, but somehow that place is definitely haunted. Children's hospitals. We spent a few months in the NICU. Now, if you aren't used to NICU life, the whole thing is terrifying. But during the day, there are bright lights and colorful artwork on the walls, cheerful, welcoming smiles from nurses and other staff. One spot particularly is supposed to be very welcoming. In our NICU, there was a wash area you were supposed to sign in, then go wash your hands for 2 minutes while a song sung by children played. Scrub-a-dub, wash your hands, blah blah blah. One night, I was having a rough time and left to take a drive in my car for like 45 minutes. When I got back to the floor, all the hallway lights were off except some backlighting spots. I couldn't sign in as there was no one at the desk. But to avoid risking my baby or anyone else's baby getting sick, I still took my 2-minute wash. The children's song was incredibly creepy in the dark. It echoed down the hall and was just really eerie. Shadows everywhere. I felt like there were people watching me, but no one was in the entry hallway. I finished and went right into our private room where my baby was soundly sleeping. I hardly ever left at night again after that. I was watching a video of an urban tour of Pripyat, the city built to support the Chernobyl plant. At day, it was fascinating walking through now empty high-rises. At night, though, very different story. The hotels there for tourists, having locked gates that close at nightfall. I would not want to be one of the outside when they lock. Still on my bucket list, though. My bedroom. Every time I do something, I have to make sure a large black clawed hand is not under my bed or reaching for me from my closet. The reasoning for my paranoia is that recently I've been having these dreams of a tall black demon with a white mask dripping this black substance from its eyes. I would say it is about 10 feet tall. Its body is skinny, but its neck gets wider and the mask is completely flat. I keep seeing it out of the corner of my eye. It reminds me of this drawing that I made at a friend's house, but that one was less creepy, and I described it as friendly. Parks. I'm a cop working night shifts. I'll go foot patrol through the park at nights. Make sure nobody is shooting up on the playground or effing in the tennis courts, etc. The city turns the lights off at night since the parks close. There's just something eerie about a place where there's supposed to be lots of people, but is instead dark and abandoned. The old Plaza Hotel in El Paso. I visit El Paso every year to hang out with a friend and go to the Classic Film Festival. The hotel has been closed since the 90s, and there are a lot of broken, boarded-up windows. Looks okay during the day, but looking at it at night and imagining what it would be like walking through that place in the dark creeps me out. Grew up in the countryside of Ireland. We have something called the Bog Road, one side of our house, and each side is disused bogland, full of bog holes, deep holes that are covered in what looks like surface pools and overgrowth. There are stories of children wandering in there and drowning, and the bog witch who screams at night. Well, you better believe cycling over that road with foxes screaming in the night is effing life-affirming by virtue of your heart pounding like a jackhammer and your legs pumping like an effing machine. Baltimore. I guess I'm naive because I'm from Oakland, California, so I assumed I'd be fine. Downtown Baltimore was fine for me during the day, so I went to my friend's hotel room and stayed with him until the sun began to set. Cue 1 a.m., and I'm drunk as hell. But hey, my hotel was nearby. I left on my own, but realized how 1920s noir Baltimore was when the streets were empty. Maybe it was because I was drunk, but seeing the wet, empty streets with steam coming out of the sewers freaked me out so much that I began running. I was 21 then too, and a girl. I don't know what I was thinking. I work closing shifts at a golf course, and one of my jobs is to lock up the pavilion before I clock out. The pavilion is used to host banquets such as weddings, proms, etc. But at night, it's the most unsettling building I've ever been in. Stacked onto the fact that the golf course is in the middle of nowhere, and I'm usually the last person there, it gets my blood pumping pretty hard. There have been nights where I literally just won't lock it up because of the unparalleled fear that I get from walking into that dimly lit building. There's also countless stories from multiple coworkers of weird shit happening while they were there alone. The sound of general commotion being heard through walls, someone whispering directly into their ear, doors and padlocks swinging for no reason, lights having a mind of their own, etc. And I wouldn't say I'm that spiritual of a person, but when I'm in that building at night, all common sense goes out the window. Shit's whack. The YMCA, night shift cleaner here. It would be a great place to film horror movies. The one I work at hasn't been remodeled since the 70s, except for tiles and porcelain. It's like an 80s horror movie. The deep black pool in a completely silent huge room. The child daycare center, filled with all the toys and bright colors but devoid of life and light, gives you the creeps in a way that I can't explain in words. The strangely lit, seemingly endless corridors that twist and turn under the building that give access to the plumbing and boiler room, etc. The strange sounds you hear. It's always lit like a horror movie no matter what room I go, except for the lobby, which is too bright, yet doesn't pierce the darkness of the locker rooms it connected with. The atmosphere just gives me the creeps. But it gets more terrifying when strange stuff happens. One time the speakers in the pool started playing music out of nowhere. When I opened the door to the room to investigate, the speakers stopped and went static. I walked towards the control room to turn the speakers off. When I was in the center of the room, it just stopped. Then I heard a sploosh, like something just quietly got into the pool. I noped the F out of there and locked the door.